وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. This next ayah immediately starts with the hardening of hearts. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ, then your hearts became hard. What's really amazing is the previous ayah said, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you then apply your intellect? So the intellect is mentioned and the heart is mentioned. There's an integral relationship between these two entities, the mind and the heart. And the Arabic language, the Arabic of the Quran helps us understand some intricacies of that relationship. The word aqal in Arabic literally means to tie. Aqala, to tie something. Like aqalat al-mar'atu sha'raha means a woman tied her hair. The woman tied her hair. Iqal is the rope that the Arabs put on top of their heads that they used to, seen Arabs that wear like the long scarves and they put the cute little rubber thing on top? Well, originally it wasn't a cute little rubber thing, it was a rope. And the rope was there because, not just because the scarf flies off, but because they would take it off and that was their anti-lock brakes for their camel. Okay, they just tie their camel with that rope. It was a means of restraint. Aql is literally called a means, the intellect is referred to as a means of restraint, a leash. Why? Because your emotions want you to do something, your temptations, your sentiments want you to say something, but you hold yourself back when you use your intellect. What we learn from that also is, when you're overly angry, you can't think clearly. When your emotions are high, you can't think clearly. When you're overly sad, overly angry, overly scared, whenever any of those emotions are running high, your mind shuts off. You're not thinking straight. Aql is a means of restraint. In other words, to the Arabs, until you have your emotions under control, emotions to the Arabs are where, by the way, in the mind or in the heart? In the heart. Until your heart is in check, you can't use your mind properly. The previous ayah said, why can't you understand? Why can't you use your mind? Or don't you understand? The next ayah says, here's why you don't understand. Because your hearts are all gone. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ, your hearts became hard. Hearts became hard because they saw a dead guy come back to life. If anything is supposed to melt your heart, that should be it. Even that didn't work. If that didn't bring you to guidance, then there's nothing else that can be done for you. Your hearts became hard. مِن بَعْدِ ذَلِكَ, even after that. فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ, then they became like stones. أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً, or they became even tougher, worse in terms of their stiffness. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ, even out of stones there are those that rip open, that burst open, and rivers come from them. Rivers burst out of them. The stones that are going to be talked about in this ayah isn't actually a conversation about stones, it's about people. 3 kinds of stones will be mentioned, and it's actually a parable of 3 kinds of hearts. 3 kinds of hearts are compared with 3 kinds of stones. In order to help you understand that, you can easily understand that when you compare at least 2 different kinds of friends you have. Introverts and extroverts, right? You have friends that are very talkative, and they always want to do stuff like play basketball, go bowling, whatever. Like they want to do stuff all the time. They can't sit still. If they're sitting still, they have to have a phone with a bunch of games on them, and they can Angry Bird for 4 hours or something. But they can't sit still. They can't just sit and think. If you hand them a book, it's like giving them death, right? They just can't do that kind of stuff. And then on the other hand, you have other kinds of friends that are very quiet and intellectual, and they're introverts and they're readers, they're thinkers, they're philosophically minded. They don't really talk much. They're not very social, right? Different kinds of people. The same thing happens with the Sahaba. There are different kinds of companions, right? There's different kinds of Sahaba. Some Sahaba are very extroverted, like Umar radiallahu anhu, Hamza radiallahu anhu. Even before Islam, they're very extroverted personalities. Umar radiallahu anhu didn't come to Islam for 6 years. The question arises, well, what's he doing for 6 years? He wasn't hating Islam for 6 years. He just kind of never heard of it because he was kind of busy. Then you wonder, what's he busy with? Well, beating up dudes, like hunting, horseback riding, battles here and there. He's up to stuff. He's got stuff to do. With people like that, you don't exactly pull them over and say, hey, you want to talk about the purpose of life on earth? It doesn't exactly occur to them. It's like, oh, I'll get back to you on that. Let me just finish beating up that dude and then I'll. Then you have the Abu Bakr Siddiqs of the world, thinkers, almost philosophers really. Really deep people, love poetry. That should be a tell-all sign already, right? Arabs, by the way, captured their philosophy inside their poetry. So the deep thinkers were poets, and he loved poetry. He's a quiet person. You know, for a person who is intellectual, they're a thinker. When the Quran is presented to them, they think about it immediately. And when they think about it, they come to their conclusions very quickly. If they have decency in them, the process is very quick. When a person is distracted in life, even if they're a good person, but they're distracted in life, they're in the middle of a lot of stuff, you can't get their attention just by talking to them. Something has to happen that shakes them up, that gets their attention. Otherwise, you can't get their attention. I'll give you an example I often give. You have two friends, the introvert, the quiet one, the intelligent thinker type, and the hyperactive one. They both go to the convention with you. Imam Siraj Wahaj is speaking. Who wants to attend? The quiet type or the extrovert? The extrovert. Imam Siraj is going to be awesome. I love how he talks. What's he going to talk about? Who cares? It's Imam Siraj Wahaj. It's going to be amazing. And Imam Siraj, mashallah, you know, he could do some really cool stuff. He could excite you about anything. He's just this power as an orator. He can excite you about anything. I was one time, I was in a lecture of Imam Siraj, and he said, when I was a child, I had a dog. And somebody said, Takbir! He can excite you about anything. And if both of your friends went to attend that lecture, and they came back from that lecture, and then your friend's like, that was awesome, it was so amazing, I'm so going to pray 5 times now. And the other friend says, I don't understand, I was trying to take notes, I know he had a dog, but what was the point he was trying to make? Like, they don't get it. And then the next session is going to be like a hadith, the history of hadith compilation workshop, 5 hours long by a scholar who's visiting from Medina or is visiting from Syria. Who wants to go? The nerd. And this time he or she drags the other one with them. It's going to be amazing. I brought 4 color pens so I can take color coordinated notes. You know? They sit there and they're taking, she's listening to, like, you know, this was the first muhaddith and they did this and they did that. These are the names, scholars. And they turn to their friend in the middle. Was that the 8th century or the 7th century? It's like, leave me alone, man. You brought me into this. It is death for them. Different kinds of people, different kinds of things appeal to them, right? Different kinds of people, things resonate with them. It's not that one's better than the other, it's just different people. Now what happens is, in this ayah, Allah talks about a rock that just bursts open. And rivers come out of it. It's like the heart of Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. The potential iman, water in this ayah is faith. Water is iman itself, faith itself. When the message is presented to him, the water was so much already inside, you basically barely had to tap it, and what happened? This iman just came out. There's no time taken for him to accept Islam. With Umar, the next kind of heart, Umar is not the interpretation, it's a sample of the next kind of heart. There's other people that can have that kind of heart. Distracted by stuff. The only way you can really get their attention is to rattle them. How does Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or Umar ibn al-Khattab come to Islam? You know the story, right? It's a traumatic experience. He hit his sister. He sees blood drip down her lip, and then he's like shaken by that. And at that moment, he has the attention of the Quran. At that moment. Had the Quran been written or given to him at a time where he wasn't paying attention like that, it wouldn't have had an effect. You know? And there's other stories in the case of Umar. He was shaken before too. Literally shaken. He was hiding behind the ghilaf of the Kaaba, the cover of the Kaaba, at night time. He was going to jump the Prophet and beat him up. The Prophet was praying. He started listening to the recitation and he said, this is some amazing poetry. That's beautiful. And the Prophet was reciting, وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ شَاعِرٍ. It's not the word of a poet. How little you believe. He says, how do you know what I was thinking? He must be a mind reader. وَمَا هُوَ بِقَوْلِ كَاهِنٍ قَلِيلًا مَا تَذَكَّرُونَ. It's not the word of a mind reader. How does he know that? What is it? تَنْزِيلٌ مِّن رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. A revelation from the Master of all nations. He ran away. He got shaken up. He didn't become Muslim, he ran away, he got scared. You know? who's just shaken by it. There are some people who will come to Islam from an intellectual journey. Some will come to Islam after a car accident, after surgery, after losing a child, after something traumatic. They're going to come to Islam after almost dying by disease. They're going to come to Islam because they lost a friend. Something happened. Something that shook them up happened. You know? And these are two different kinds of hearts. So the second kind of heart, Allah says, وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. Out of the hearts there are ones that crack open and water comes out. It doesn't open on its own. It has to be hit and then it cracks open. Something has to shake it, and guess what? You'll still find water in there. When you look at it, you think there can't be any water in that one. Not in our homework. He's going to be a Muslim? Come on. Seriously? That guy? Do you know what he does? He's going to be Muslim. And then when that heart is shaken, Iman comes out of there too. But then there's a third kind of heart. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. Even out of them, there are those that fall from the fear of Allah. They fall from the fear of Allah. Allah mentions rocks that are falling like a landslide. You know how the picture of a landslide where rocks are falling? But He doesn't mention any water this time. The first two kinds of hearts, they were water. One more water than the other. But the third one, there was no water. What Allah is talking about is Islam without Iman. Islam without Iman. Iman is represented by what in this example? Water. When there's no water mentioned, but it still has the fear of Allah, it's submitting. It's falling from the fear of Allah, like a man falling in sajda from the fear of Allah. Like the rock falls from the fear of Allah. But he may not have tasted Iman yet. There is such a thing as having Islam without Iman. Having become Muslim, coming to the faith without tasting the sweetness in your heart. Maybe your mind has submitted. Your intellect has submitted to this mission or this belief, but your heart hasn't tasted its sweetness yet. And when the heart tastes its sweetness, you'll shed tears. It'll tell. Your mind doesn't make you cry, your heart does. Right? So Allah says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا قُلْ لَمْ تُؤْمِنُوا وَلَكِنْ قُولُوا أَسْلَمْنَا. But when say they have faith, tell them, no, you don't have faith, you've accepted Islam. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Iman hasn't entered your hearts yet. This water hasn't entered your rocks yet. That's what that is. Interestingly, the ayah began, your hearts were so hard, they were even worse than rock. Then Allah talked about three kinds of rock. Three kinds of rock represent three kinds of hearts. Three kinds of hearts that have hope, that have potential. And why give this example? You know how hypocrites said, what does Allah mean by this as an example? Remember that? Why give the example of rocks? Because He's talking to Bani Israel. They actually take pride in the history where water came out of rocks. So give them an example relevant to their experience. That's what Allah does. He's talking to Bani Israel. What better example than water and rock? وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. And Allah is not at all unaware of what you're up to. أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَنْ يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ. Allah turns to the Sahaba. He says to the Sahaba, you really think they're going to accept what you're saying? You know, the Sahaba were hopeful. The Quraysh had no experience with a book, with a prophet, with revelation. They had lost the legacy of Ibrahim a long time ago. So when they heard angel, revelation, prophet, like this is all new stuff to them. When the Sahaba moved to Medina, they were like, these guys, people of the book, they know Isa. Hey, they know Isa too, they know Musa too. They know Nuh, they know Adam. They know all of these previous revelations. This is going to be so much easier. Because they know this stuff. Mushrikun were so hard because they didn't know any of this stuff. Right? That's what the Sahaba thought. Wishful thinking, you know. There's going to be an easier sale to make. They're going to understand this message because they're already halfway in. And they're waiting for their final messenger. What better sale can there be? What easier pitch can there be than Islam to these Jews? So Allah gives the Muslims a reality check. After this track record of Bani Israel, well, they've known the truth before, let me tell you. And it hasn't exactly worked out that way. So at the end of all this, He says, أَفَتَطْمَعُونَ أَنْ يُؤْمِنُوا لَكُمْ. Are you really actually hopeful, realistically hopeful that they're going to accept what you're going to say? وَقَدْ كَانَ مِنْهُمْ فَرِيقٌ يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. That there was already a group among them that used to listen to the speech of Allah directly. يَسْمَعُونَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُحَرِّفُونَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا عَقَلُوهُ. Then they alter it, and they did and continue to alter it even after they understood it. If Allah says they altered it without realizing what they're doing, that's one thing. You're copying a transcript of the Torah and you make a mistake, that's something else. They changed it after understanding it, knowing what they're doing. So understanding isn't their problem. The problem is in the previous ayah, understanding was there, what was missing? The hearts had become hard. There's no fear of Allah left. There's no fear of consequences left. Our hearts are strange creatures, this thing that Allah made. If it's guided, the Prophet told us, right? When the heart is good, everything is good. You know what else that means? You guys are, for example, the ones that are in this program, in the full-time, the Arabic program. You have to exhaust your brain learning mubtada and khabar, and madi and mudari, and amr and mansoob and majzoom and marfu' and mansoob and majroor. And you have to fry brain cells to learn this stuff. But you know why you're here? Not because of your minds. Your heart says, I love Quran. I want to be here. I want to learn this language. The best of your mind is exhausted where your heart puts it. The heart is the driver. The smartest med student is exhausting his mind. Why though? His heart says, one day my dad will be proud. One day I'll be done with this. One day, hopefully one day I'll save lives. Not one day I'll be the president of the masjid, right? Because I'm a doctor. It's called lazim and malzoom. They have to be one or the other. You have to have one with the other, right? Those of you that are physicians, try to avoid the boards of masajid. Just as a challenge to yourself. See if you can do it. They'll suck you right in. And donate to masjids you're not a part of. See how that works out for you. Anyway, on a side note. So, they alter it even after having understood it, and they well know. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. When they come to those who believe, they say, we have iman already. We believe just like you guys. We have the same exact beliefs. We're very similar. وَإِذَا خَلَا بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ. When they go back among their own people, these are Jews that came to the Prophet ﷺ, and some of them heard the story of Musa ﷺ from the Prophet. They're like, hey, wait, we have that. Oh, you guys have that too? Wow, we have a lot in common. That's amazing. Let me go talk to my rabbi, because this is pretty good right here. So they go back, and they go excited to their leader, and they say, you know what I heard from the Muslims today? They have exactly what we believe. Word for word. It's exactly the same. We should talk to these guys. We have so much in common with them. And the leadership says, shh, you be quiet. Don't tell them anything more. And so we're going to learn what the inside conversation was from the leadership to their naive followers. The naive followers who were so happy when they heard about Islam and went excited to their own leadership. What did the leadership tell them? Allah was in on that meeting. أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ لِيُحَاجُّوكُمْ بِهِ عِنْدَ رَبِّكُمْ. Are you telling them stuff that they will use against you on Judgment Day as a case against you? أَتُحَدِّثُونَهُمْ. Are you telling them stuff? بِمَا فَتَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. By means of which Allah will have a case against you. لِيُحَاجُّوكُمْ بِهِ. So that they can make a case. These guys will debate with you in front of Allah that they came to us and told us, yes, we have this in our books too. If you say that with your tongue, Allah will have witness. You're going to burn in hell for admitting that. Just don't talk to them. Be quiet. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Why don't you all understand? This could be them saying it to their followers. It could be Allah saying, how stupid can you be? Why don't you think? You're the leaders. You're the religious elite. Don't you know? أَوَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ. Don't they already know that Allah knows what they hide and what they announce to people? Don't they know that Allah already has a case against them? وَمِنْهُمْ أُمِّيُّونَ. Then Allah helps us understand, why did this happen? Why this naive attitude from some of them? Among them are unlettered people. لَا يَعْلَمُونَ الْكِتَابِ. They don't know the book, إِلَّا أَمَانِيَّ, except wishful thoughts. وَإِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَظُنُّونَ. They do nothing but make assumptions. They don't really know their book, they just make assumptions. They think they know what it says. I told you about this ayah. It's the scariest interpretation by Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Scariest interpretation. The word amani in this ayah means wishful thoughts. Wishful thoughts. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma says, amani ay tilawa ya'rifunahu hifdhan wa qira'atan bila fahmin la yadruna ma fiha. Amani, wishful thoughts here means the only thing they do with their book is they recite it. They know it by memorizing a little bit of it and reciting some of it without understanding any of it. They have no clue what's inside. That's Ibn Abbas explaining the crime that these guys did with their book. You go around to the educated Muslim community in America and you ask a scary question. Find me a group of people that love a book, recite a book, memorize parts of the book, celebrate its tajweed. They love listening to it. But the vast majority of the same people that listen to it and recite it have no care or knowledge of what it says. Doesn't describe them. It doesn't describe it. It's a scary thought. لا يعلمون الكتاب إلا أمانية وإنهم إلا يظنون. They do nothing but make assumptions. Very confident